Here is the overall mantra, strategy, approach, whatever you want to call it. Play pots with them and open your mind.
He doesn't muck around before chucking it in. We're good. We win a 182 blind pot with second pair, which illustrates the point of pre. I go for it in the thin value jam. He beats me in the pot, rolls over the...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we're going to have some fun and discuss how we should be playing against whales. The dream spot, lots of money up for grabs. Let's dive in how to maximize for every last penny. First up here, what is a whale? Plain and simply, someone with an extraordinary loss rate, losing in the realm of 50 to 200 blinds per 100, losing a shit ton of money. Let's think about this for a second. There are 6 regs at the table, all of equal ability. In today's reg climate, you're all losing around 7 blinds per 100. Of course, that won't be the reality. There'll be some better than others, but for argument's sake, let's say that's the reality. Whale sits and injects roughly 125 blinds per 100. There is now money up for grabs. That 125 blinds is roughly split between the 5 players at the table, minus your 7 blinds per 100 rake. We're now all winning 18 blinds per 100. Not too shabby. The point of this little demonstration, whales are the lifeblood of the ecosystem. They are so unbelievably important to your bottom line. Putting yourself in situations to play against them and then playing very well is obviously very important. Back to that point I made in the first video, it is your job to put yourself in situations where the chances of you playing with one of these whoppers is at the highest, and then capitalizing on the opportunity when you're there. Identifying the whales. Well, it goes without saying it ain't Roccos. However, the biggest early clues are obviously going to be a high VPIP. They're in there very often. The belugas are going to be playing 85+% of hands. The dolphins, so to speak, are going to be playing, say, 30% of hands. And secondly, making very poor post-flop decisions. This will be ranging. The really high lose rates are going to be getting to rivers very often, regardless of their strength of hand. They're putting money in across streets that is really contributing to that very high loss rate. They can be blasting, they can just be calling down very badly, but they're getting to those later streets in those bigger pots with hands that certainly shouldn't be getting there. And the smaller loss rates could just be getting to the flop a lot and then playing fit or fold. If you're seeing 50% of flops, and if you don't flop something decent, just folding, that's going to add up pretty quick, constituting you as a whale. Okay, before we get into a couple of examples to demonstrate exactly how I'm playing against whales, here is the overall mantra, strategy, approach, whatever you want to call it. Play pots with them and open your mind. A non-dynamic, static strategy will be the death of your win rate in comparison to those who are fluid to the situation and are willing to mix things up, play on the fly, if you will, to take advantage of this lucrative situation that will no doubt be over before you know it. Make hay while the sun is shining, get involved. So all well and good, we want to be widening our range to some degree. How wide do we go? There are going to be no hard and fast answers here. It's impossible to know what is profitable in a situation like this, given the complexity of the variables. That's not to say we hang our hat and don't think about it. I think there are 2 key loose factors we want to keep in mind to make the judgment on how wide we should be in game. First up, are we getting away with it? Dream scenario is for us to be sitting next to the whale, 1 or 2 seats to the left, and the rest of the table are tight recs or regs who aren't willing to open their mind and go outside the lines like we are. We're going to sufficiently open up our range and the players behind us aren't going to do anything about it, and we get to end up in a lot more pots in position versus the whale than any of these other players. We're going to capture much more of that 125 big blinds than the rest of them. In a nutshell, I think a lot of you guys will be playing in games where you will be getting away with it. People will see your aggression and not come to the next logical step that they need to be kicking you back in line with lighter 3 bets. So until that is happening, you have the green light to play all sorts of hands. Second up, which goes into this first point, how good is the spot? How profitable will it be for me to be involved with the whale? Are we 200 blinds deep and he's tilted? He's going to give his whole stack away any second. Or is he 30 blinds deep and he's taking a phone call, perhaps not interested in playing the hand? You see what I mean about being fluid to the situation, in tune with the game flow, understanding when money is more likely to go in far more loosely than it should. We want to be ready in there, capitalizing when the volcano is about to explode. A couple of interesting examples to demonstrate. They are going to require you to open your mind. King 9 off, under the gun. To the closed-minded player, they're going to look at the chart and see this is a losing proposition. It folds 100% of the time. However, if the situation is good enough, in that these players behind are going to lie down and not react to the widening of our range, and we get to play in position versus a whale 165 blinds deep, I guarantee you that this is going to swing profitable. Just going to quickly show you how much King 9 off is losing in a nutshell, opening into a field that are of equal ability when they don't necessarily know his strategy. That means the players behind aren't efficiently reacting to the fact that we're opening too wide and punishing us for it. This hand loses next to nothing. 0.031 of a big blind. What do you think is going to happen if you inject someone like this that is continuing with the deck and playing very poorly post? You're going to be able to play it profitably. You start to get into trouble when the players behind realize and say, this guy's off his head, and start 3-betting you relentlessly. That's when we're just not going to get to see flops, and we'll struggle to realize with all the hands that don't want to face 3-bet. All of a sudden 10-9 suited and pocket sixes are facing heavy aggression when they open. It starts to turn into a lesser situation for more of our hands. But until that happens, we can get involved much wider than you think to take advantage of this fruitful situation. Similar story here. In a very good spot versus a whale only 100 blinds deep, where are the boundaries? Again, we're going to hinge off those two factors. Are we getting punished behind? How often are we going to be able to efficiently isolate the whale? And how good of a spot is it to do so? In a nutshell, I think the 10-6 suited is in there. If we're any shallower or we had decent players behind, I'd have higher standards. But the main point is, open up your mind. Some hands you perhaps were auto-folding that weren't in your mind as playable certainly can be if the situation is right. Okay, we're now going to run through some specific adjustments. Again, there are no hard and fast guidelines here. It's impossible to know where the actual lines are. It takes some intuition and fluid assessment of the situation to put forward a range that you think is going to win. First up, opening into their big blind. A situation where we are under the gun. We're lucky enough to be sitting to the direct left of the whale. A long range attempt to get involved with them. How wide are we going to go? This is probably the tightest I'm going to go. I'm extending into all of those hands that are close enough to break even. The situation would have to be particularly stark for me to open tighter than this. For me to be denying the Jack 10 off, the pocket fours, the 10-8 suited, I'd have to have a particular amount of respect for the players behind, expecting them to realize that I'm opening too wide and potentially punish me. In a soft lineup, players behind aren't punishing us. Something like this looks reasonable. All of those pocket pairs, decent suited stuff, creeping into the gap suited connectors, ace 9 off, Jack 10 off. If that situation is just amazing like we described earlier, we're going to start creeping into hands as bad as this. How about now? Obviously a vastly different situation with only one play in between that can punish us. It's very likely we're going to go heads up with the whale here. There's far less dilution, situations that can play out that suck for us. In that under the gun scenario, we need to somewhat rein it in depending on who's behind. In this scenario, I'm going to be pretty disrespectful. Opening anything from this to every single hand. Again, we're fluid to the situation. If old mate's got 32 blinds, he's in some rampant mood where he's just shoving it in, opening 9-4 off isn't going to win. If he's just some epic passive whale who just never 3-bets, plays every hand and then just check folds flop or turn, every single hand's going to profit. Next up here, ISOing them, very similar approach. The later we are in position, the less players behind who can punish us, the more likely it is we're going to go heads up in position versus the whale. The wider we're going to go, the more disrespectful we're going to go. Better that situation is, the more we're pushing the boundaries. In those earlier spots, assessing who's behind us, how deep we are with the whale, how good of a situation it would be if we do isolate them is going to set my boundaries. In this scenario, a whale has limped off 55 blinds. We are directly behind on the button. Let's say we have 2 standard regs behind. How wide are we going to go? How good of a situation is this? Where do we set our boundaries? Given the stack depth, we want to be taking a more specific higher card heavy type range opposed to hands like 6-4 suited and 10-5 suited that might need some stack depth to make for a good situation. Here are my rough guidelines. Again, I'm going to be thinking about how my opponent plays. If he is just limping in, going to fold a lot now and on flop, I'd go wider than this. But I think this is a good start, taking that stack depth into consideration. Back to this situation from earlier on, the 10-6 suited would be a little aggressive in play in the right circumstances. This is probably more like a base ISOing range here. Building off of this, the better that situation becomes, filling out some of these gaps, getting all the way to a hand like 10-6 suited if that situation is just amazing. Stack depth, players behind not punishing you, the whale giving away money at any minute. Fluid to the situation. How about defending our big blind? This is an interesting one because you're going to face so many different scenarios in differing opening ranges, differing sizes, potential cold callers in between. I'm going to beat this to death and you're going to be sick of me saying it by the end, but again, how good is the situation? Is this guy just giving money away? Do we only need to catch top pair to be in a very profitable spot? Or does he have a sizing towel and he's opened 5x? We know that he has a very top left-hand corner heavy range. I'm not going to get involved with Queen 10 offsuit. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. Standard situation, a whale is open to a normal size on the button, likely opening too many hands. Every hand that is near enough break even, we're definitely getting involved. It's a standard plus situation, meaning that his range is wider and he's going to play worse. Any hand that is close is going to profit. Expanding around the edges, all of these hands that are relatively close, we're going to be able to make them work. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to run into spots like this pretty frequently. We're not going to be able to refer to a simulation to know where the boundaries are. We need to intuit what is going to survive facing this big of a size. We need to realize a 40% pot share for us to break even here. A hand like King 10 offsuit is likely dominated by this open. There isn't that many good scenarios. We're going to go to flops, often whiff, is likely going to c-bet range, and we're going to have to just muck, or if we catch a piece, have to sketchily defend, not knowing if we're good or not. The more speculative the hand is, those implied odds of catching something big to crack this likely strong range, they're the hands that are going to survive. The 6-4 suiteds, the pocket pairs, the suited kings and aces, staying away from that dominated Broadway region. A very important point here, this should be a headline takeaway for many of you guys. How do we play cold calls with them behind? What kind of strategy do we want to be implementing when we have a player of interest behind? You would have heard this before, but we want to be putting forward polar strats, playing a lot of calls to manifest that situation where we go multi-way with a player who is capable of giving us all the chips at any moment. It tilts the shit out of me sitting down, the whale behind, and you'll get some young try-hard pro who is still playing 3-bet or fold in early position because that's his strategy. Fluid to the situation. A typical situation that I'm talking about, don't get me wrong, pocket queens is going to be a fine 3-bet. However, we need to open our mind. If this is the type of whale to go to the flop with any two, flop top pair with 10-8 offsuit and put in 180 big blind, it's going to be a better play to flat an indifferent hand, meaning the insolvable end both plays are of equal value. Just because the color is red 3-bet doesn't mean that it is a clear play. Entertaining that idea to manifest that good spot where we get to play a pot versus this lad should be at the forefront of your mind. My 3-bet range here would look something like this, ribbing the hands that must do so and chucking in the bottom of our continues at a small frequency as our bluffs, continuing mostly through a call with hands such as this to manifest that situation with the whopper as much as possible. Similar thoughts in this hand, however we're in a much better spot. We're obviously going to play in position being on the button. We're far less likely to get squeezed out with only one reg in between. Going to open up the floodgates here for sure. Still playing a very polar strat, rebetting something similar to what I just showed you. However, really expanding those calls, given that we're 175 blinds deep with this lad. I'm going to play a call strat that looks something like this. Lots of hands. All of these hands are around the mark, losing a bee's dick in theory. With a big old whopper in the big blind, they are going to swing profitable. For what it's worth, the bottom of our continues has now changed given that we are flatting so wide. Not going to be 3-betting the ace jack off as it's just too good of a call. We might 3-bet a queen 10 offsuit and a king 3 suited, queen 4 suited from time to time to be that bottom end of the polar 3-bet. Just quickly before we move on to some post-flop adjustments to have us thinking on our feet, we're fluid, we're open-minded. There are going to be some scenarios where limping strats are well in play. Very deep stacked versus beluga whales who are raising every hand. Makes a lot of sense to be throwing in limps out of position. We want to play pots with lots of hands that don't necessarily want to face his 3-bet, and we're also going to have a region that's going to be interested in limp raising. The idea of playing an open fold strat is predicated on the idea that you're a much better chance to take down the blinds when you do that. When someone's in their VPP 90% playing very aggressive, that is no longer the case. You never want to be rigid and have these preconceived ideas of how you should be playing. In these environments, options open up. Be free thinking enough to do something that makes sense for the environment you're in. Sizing options. I was literally just playing a very juicy 5, 5, 10, 20 game last night where there was a whale who was very deep stack with me playing every single hand regardless of the price. Folds to me on the button and I have 2 aces, 200. He calls and is no wiser about the strength of our range. I've been in games with some very good pros watching them isolate these whales to 20x the big blind. Point is, open your mind up. Rigidness will be the death of your win rate in comparison to the regs who are willing to be creative. Okay, moving on to some post-flop play. First up, we want to punish the fishiness. General leak of whales is just getting to rivers far too light. Any sort of a piece, their goal is to try and make strong hands regardless of the price. Make them pay. We're going to do this with a very thin value-driven strategy. Our standards for value betting go way down. We're not rigid to a one-size strategy by any means. Let's tailor what we're trying to do with our exact hand, meaning that we're going to have thin value buckets, putting in smaller sizes, thicker value hands, putting in bigger sizes, tailoring our line with what we exactly have. Generally, our hands are going to be worth more. Put a couple chips on top. Beef and shaved to the extremes. These players are not catching on to this kind of stuff. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. This is a hand I actually played a couple of days ago here at the Commerce. Couple of rockets, lovely sight to see with the whale in the pot. He opens to 4x better news. This lad had sizing tails, so I'm pretty confident that he's got a hand that he's not going to fold. I'll react to this by beefing up the 3-bet. Bang, 5x, 20 blinds. We've got a lot of money in the middle already. Simply understanding this play is going to underfold. And if I had a hand like Queen Jack suited where I was just trying to isolate, I'd probably be going something like 12 blinds, not expecting these
these players to really catch on to what I'm doing and not overinvest for what our hand is worth. With the 2 rockets, let's put some money in. Whale comes along. King 7-3, he comes in for a check. We beef up a c-bet. We'll be playing a standard B33 check in this spot versus someone who could actually play, versus the whale who's going to have a very inelastic range. He's not going to look at a hand like pocket 8s or even pocket 5s with a diamond and fold to this size. Let's charge that fishiness. He comes along. 8 of hearts, beautiful turn card. He comes in for a dog. Very merged range. This lad is a merge monkey, one of his biggest faults. Can be doing this with pocket pairs, king X, random flush draws. There's very little bottom of range in this, so I'm always raising. We go for a click up to play across 3. Obviously, shove would be the standard play, but don't really want to do that with such an invulnerable hand. I want to get him to the river and then have such little stack it behind that he just says, bugger it, I'm all in. He calls, river bricks off, and he just puts the money in for us. We beat him in the pot. He shows up with the pocket 9s. Needless to say, this is a horrible play. Point of the hand, put additional money in, charge that fishiness. Next real hand I actually played a few weeks ago in the 5-10 streets. It may appear that I'm always just sitting to the direct left of the whales. I'm not doing this intentionally, and a point that I want to make. Don't be that guy who just snap takes the seat next to the whale. I promise you this was pure coincidence. They just happened to sit to my right. I'm certainly not complaining when that happens, but I'm not going to manifest that situation. Don't micro edge seek. These people aren't stupid. They'll get the vibe that you're being predatory and won't want to play with you in future. That is already a massive net negative, and it just creates this maggoty environment where you and all the regs are fighting over the seat. Show a bit of class. Anyway, this whale limps in. This guy is a very, very special man. Plays about 90% of hands. Very merged, straightforward, loose post flop. We isolate the king 10, big size, putting in money when it's likely to flow back to us with a hand that is dominating his very wide range. We go heads up to 10-5 deuce rainbow. Beautiful situation. He comes in for a donk. Again, very merged range. He's not going to be doing this with jack 9 offsuit. He's going to have some sort of a pair or straight draw on board. Very, very clear raise to put money in. On this earlier street where he's making many calling mistakes, charge the fishiness. We bump it up to 25 blinds. He continues. 6 of clubs. He comes in for another donk. We might be somewhat scared to say yes. He's got there with 3-4. He might have made some 2 pairs, but as I said, very special man. I think he can be doing this with 5-4, pocket 3s, worse 10x. Plain and simply, I'm still loving my hand, and we're up against a bunch of second best stuff that will no doubt usually flick it in. I go for the thin value jam. He beats me in the pot, rolls over the 10-6 of hearts. Unfortunate turn card. Don't be results oriented. The strategy is to charge them, get really greedy for thin value when you suspect that you have decent equity in the hand. And once again, we are sitting 2 to the left of the whale. Coincidence, I promise. Run pretty good this session in terms of seed assignment. This hand comes from that Santa session that I was posting on my Instagram. A very famous lad who everyone loves to play with. The man himself, Santa Claus. Folds around to the big fellow who comes in for a standard open. A pro in between him and I bumps it up. Back to pre-flop, open up your mind. This is an incredible spot to play versus the whales when we flop a set or even a decent second pair, i.e. what ends up happening. We're in a good spot. We want to be playing cold calls here for sure. We come in for the call. Santa chucks it in 3-way to 10-7-4 two-tone. Checks over to us. We come in for a small bet, a point that I'll get to later on. I think this range is probably a little more transparent, capped than it should be given the incentive for him to isolate versus the whale. In a regular scenario, he'd be checking lots here, but I just think hands like pocket jacks through kings are going to bet given the incentive to play versus the big fella. We come in for a small bet, heads up to the turn versus Santa Claus. And a spade's pretty damn good card. Our equity is a lot higher than it would be in a normal situation. The width of that flop calling range, having pocket 2s in there, king queen off, all sorts of straight draws and flush draws, 7x, a slam dunk, another value bet versus these tendencies. Charge the fishiness. We stick in 25 blinds. Big fella comes along. Pretty good river. I'll add that Santa snap called on turn. That insinuates to me that his range is heading towards marginal showdown value, away from a trapped king 10 off. Those hands are mostly going to raise, rarely going to snap call trying to slow me down. On this brick river, I think we have another value bet. This is the size I went for in game, which I don't hate. We are going thin. We want to get a crying call from a worse hand, so we don't want to scare him off with B75 plus. But I think we could beef this up a bit. I think this and say 60 blinds will get a very similar reaction. So a small improvement, but I like my value bet. He doesn't muck around before chucking it in. We're good. We win 182 blind pot with second pair, which illustrates the point of pre very well. Get involved. You're going to be able to make good situations, understand where you are, capitalize on his fishiness more than you are against any other player. play pots with them, get greedy with thin value. Bluffing, interesting topic. Should we be bluffing these types? The old adage of never bluff the fish. They're too bad to fold. They're just gonna call with everything. Utter nonsense. Poker is never as simplistic to adhere to overall generalizations. One, it's not true. There are plenty of spots that are very profitable to bluff, and even if most of them weren't, you don't want to be just so zoomed out to miss the ones where there can be profit up for grabs by bluffing. First up, certainly don't just shut down. I used to play like that. I used to open up my range like I've advised you guys. I'd get to flop c-bet. These players would inevitably call, and then I'd just wave the white flag. This would put me in a position to lose the pot very often because they're getting to the river, often going to bluff when they miss, or just be able to show down their marginal hands. You're actually playing into their strategy playing like that. You're allowing them to realize their equity when you should be punishing that wider range with upped aggression, both for thin value and potentially bluffing if the spot's right for it. All that said, we want to be bluffing vulnerable ranges. Let's have a look at a couple of examples. Another real hand I've played here at the Commerce in the 2040 games over the last couple of weeks. Whale opens to a modest size in the hijack. We come along with the 10-6 suited on the button. Definitely going to be able to make this one profitable versus this player. Another famous whale that goes by BB. We go three ways with a reg in the big blind. Checks the whale who puts in a small bet. Now, I know this player quite well. Sizing tells. Very linear with his sizing. When he has a good hand, we're going to see half pot plus. The smaller, more modest c-bet, moving towards the weaker side of things. Ace queens, maybe some jack X, some pocket tens, pocket eights, random bluffs, etc. This is a range that is vulnerable to bluffing. If we were looking at this from that zoomed out, never bluff the fish attitude, we might say that a fish has c-bet on a texture that is good for his range. We shouldn't be bluffing these players. He's going to have some strong hands. Let's just get out of the way. That would miss the nuance of this hand, that he's just simply moving towards hands that he doesn't necessarily like that we're going to be able to pressure across streets. Let's pump this up. I come in for a modest raise. This is going to get some fold equity versus all of the trash right here and now. We're going to get more information off him in that if he doesn't re-raise, we're going to be very confident that we're going to be able to blast in a bet on turn and get lots of folds versus a hand like ace jack or 10-9 suited. The red gets out of the way and we go heads up to the 6 of clubs, picking up a pair for that lad who's been giving me a bit of grief that we should never be bluffing with showdown value. We've picked up something, we beat ace queen. But what if I were to tell you that you were going to get him to fold 90% of his hands? Yes, we're beating some of them, but for the most part, we're behind and we're going to be able to realize an overfold of the hands that we're losing to. We come in for a large bet, our opponent quickly gets out of the way, likely folding some sort of weak jack, perhaps pocket eights, 9x, etc. Point of this hand is, tuned into what their range is. If we're moving it towards the weaker side of things, we can pump up the pressure, likely realizing an overfold. This hand comes from the same session. Reg opens MP, whale flats on the button. We have the queen jack of clubs in the big blind. Very easy squeeze for me. I know this reg is opening too wide from every position. The whale will have the deck. There's a decent amount of dead money that we can just go after now. If not, it's quite likely we just raise and go heads up with the whale with a hand that will play quite well. We make it 16 blinds and that scenario plays out. 10-10 deuce. What should we do? We flop bugger all. Thing is, this whale is still going to get here with plenty of hands he shouldn't. King queen offsuit. Ace-9 offsuit, all sorts of random suited gappers. This just simply means he's arriving to flop with trash. We can put in a bet, still get some folds, we're going to have some equity versus calling range, and play turns. Again, we don't want to be putting in this bet and then just horrified to put more money in now that he's continuing, never bluff the fish. We want to be in the hand, analysing where we think his range is moving towards to come to a decision of whether or not we should be bluffing or not. We put in a small bet, he comes in for a quick call, and before this turn comes down, I'm relatively optimistic about bluffing turns. He's going to have some ace-high floats, some weaker pairs that we can pressure on certain cards. I think most of the 10x will at least consider raising. Therefore, this range can be vulnerable on turns. Jack of hearts. Interesting card. Given that I said that I'm optimistic about bluffing turns, not really loving getting thin value on a card like this. Those ace highs, weaker pocket pairs, random floats. Aren't loving this card. It creates polarity for sure. So a situation where I'm not exactly loving going for that thin value that we argued for earlier in the video. I go for a check and he quickly comes in for a small bet. We'll get back to this hand in just a minute. The point being, we're not playing this simplistic c-bet give up strategy. We're in the hand. If they have a vulnerable range, we're open to the idea of bluffing. Just a quick hypothetical counterexample to keep these cogs turning. We defend a 5-4-0, go heads up to ace-5-6 range, check it over, whale comes in for a bigger than half pot c-bet. We continue with our bottom pair and go for a fancy check raise on this connecting looking card. Whale goes for the bet call. A situation like this where I think it's pretty stark to be bluffing. Does not have a vulnerable range here. He's going to be filled with high absolute hand strength. Random ace-x that is now improved, very unlikely to fold. We need to be in tune with their center of range, open to the idea / pushing the bill when we think it's moving towards weak hands that we will be able to efficiently pressurize. In a situation like this where they're just going to shrug, say, I have a very good hand, you just want to have it. That is the message. Be aware of where their range is at. You don't want to try and bluff fish when they have strong ranges. You do when they have weak ones. Zoomed in view of where their range is at. So we want to be aware when they're moving towards equity. They are the situations where they're likely to at least call one more or potentially station off. When we have that good sense where the range is just bottom up, filled with trash, that's when we have the foot on the gas. One last thought here, bluffing rivers. Look for the call folds. Are their hands that are naturally getting there, hoping to improve, and when they don't, are just going to relinquish? On very dynamic draw-heavy boards where they have just been calling, it's very likely they're getting to the river with a hand that was hoping to improve. When all of those draws brick off, counterintuitively, I think we should be bluffing more. Yes, we should have more perceived bluffs ourselves. Their range is going to be littered in hands they were just fishing to get there with. On more static lockdown boards, it was more likely they were bluff catching you, and it's questionable whether or not they have changed their mind. When there are natural call folds, I'm reluctant to not put in that last bullet. Usually for a modest size, given their range is somewhat inelastic. As always, be zoomed into what you think their range is. How about bluff catching? Again, we're not going to adhere to generalizations. Be in the spot and figure it out. These players are going to provide you with information that you wouldn't have versus a better player to put the pieces together of where you think they're at in range. They're going to have sizing tails somewhere within the hand that's going to move their range in one direction. Beyond the hunt, watching hands, looking for showdowns to put this information together. Information is up for grabs playing against these players. They don't conceal their strategy very well at all. Lots of them will give strong live reads if we're playing in the live realm. It's pretty hilarious how obvious it can be. Some of these players will be incredibly talkative when they've got it, so confident trying to do something to get you to call them, and when they don't, they're just static trying to hide something. Open your mind to using this stuff to base information off versus these player types. They'll often have wide unfiltered ranges, meaning they have many potential bluffs in comparison to a potential sparse value range, i.e. a very good spot to be bluff catching. Let's jump into some hands. Back to this Queen Jack of Clubs versus our beloved BB. We check it over. He comes in for a third pot bet, which is rather peculiar. I'm a little intrigued as to what he's doing here. I think if he had a flush or a 10, he probably goes a little bigger. Player types can be capable of just merge spewing with a hand like pocket sevens. This play isn't necessarily like that, so I am a little concerned / raising an eyebrow as to where his range is at. We continue. Ace of diamonds, check it over, and he quickly just goes all in. His range will be no walk in the park here. He has called a bet on flop, put a bet in on turn, and then just continued on this card that looks like it's in our wheelhouse. There's going to be very few natural air bluffs on this run out. Has to have floated us with some random 9-8 of spades, which I think will get there, but questionable whether or not it takes the line. Decent chunk of natural value, few available bluffs, and questionable whether or not they'll take them. I think this is a pretty easy fold. The only data point in favor of call is that turn size. My read on that isn't quite strong enough to go in favor of these other factors we've just mentioned. The more objective, stronger data points, he's called a bet, gone bet on two cards that will be one scary to bluff and provide him with value bets. Certainly not a typical situation you're looking to station down. We do throw it away. Unfortunately, our man throws the 8 deuce of spades in our face. Well played, sir. Got us this time. Can't be results oriented though. This player will go through moods when he'll have a reasonable range, and every now and then he'll just be in a mood to say fuck it, like he was just here. Quite hard to predict that. Nice answer. Just to hand that process. Value range in comparison to potential bluffs. This hand is actually played from another hero's perspective. One of the best players in the pool here at the Commerce. Played in that famous Santa session. We're playing some 20, 40, 80. Santa, of course, is involved. Plays 90% of hands when he's in the mood. Lovely sight to see the couple of cocks on the button or you stick it up. Big size. Again, you can see what he's doing here. Really charging this inability to fold, building the pot with a hand. It's obviously pushing a shit ton of equity. No-brainer decision. We get a cold call from a reg in the middle blind. And go 3 ways to ace 5-4 two-tone. Checks to us, nothing else to do with check back with the pocket kings here, middle of range. Both the reg and Santa can have plenty of aces and potentially even some check raises that we obviously wouldn't like to see. We check it back, checks through 8 of hearts on the turn, checks to Santa again, who now puts in a pretty chunky bet. Close decision with pocket kings here for sure. Not sure if I would find the continue here in game. But certainly not going to doubt my boy here. He knows his shit. Trying to get into his mind here. There are many a potential bluffs with Santa having the deck pre-flop and this board providing many a natural semi-bluffs in gut shots, flush draws. pair plus draw. Santa can even be liable to just merge with pocket sixes after the flop checks through in terms of the player behind. As we said earlier, there is some incentive for you to just bet and isolate yourself versus Santa, really not wanting this one to check through when you have a hand like ace queen. That range probably is reasonably heavy in worse pocket pairs and brick suited broadways that we don't have to be that worried about. Without a doubt a close decision though, we can just be drawing very thin versus the abundance of ace X that Santa will have. Nonetheless, not going to doubt this lad. He comes in for the call. We go heads up to the deuce of spades, and now Santa continues for 2/3 pot. Interesting one. Differs from that last scenario in one key factor: unfiltered range. It's just checked the turn, and Santa's had the opportunity to potentially bluff with every hand he gets to flop with. We know that he's playing a shitload of hands. That means there is an abundance of potential bluffs. Queen 7 offsuit. If he's not continuing being aggressive for thin value with a hand like ace 10, starts to become quite polar at 2 pair plus, one of those ragged offsuit hands we just mentioned. Again, I think this is somewhat close given the willingness to do this into 2 players. More to show you this process. Value range in comparison to potential bluffs. Be dialed into what you think their range is and how they could lose control to come to a bluff catching decision. Our boy chucks it in with the pocket cocks, and he's very glad to see the 9-6 of clubs. He's done a service to the table because Santa is now going to be steaming his tits off. He got called down quite light by a hand that he would have expected to get a fold from, and he'll now proceed to donate this 650 blinds to the rest of the table. Doing the Lord's work. Thank you, sir. This next one is another hand that I didn't play, a practical poker prodigy wheel that I'll introduce on this channel in a few videos time. Played this one downstairs in a 2040 game also. Whale comes in for a limp. We isolate the 7-6 suited in the cutoff. We go 3 ways with another reg. Beautiful flop of king 7-6 two-tone, checks over to us. We put in a beefed up half pot c-bet, go 3 ways to the queen of diamonds, checks over to us. We start putting in more money with a strong vulnerable hand, clear play, go heads up with the whale, deuce of clubs. Whale comes in for a pot-sized donk shove. Now easy call with our hand, of course. Amazing bluff catcher. We are bluff catching for sure. He's not going to be doing this with a random king jack. Well, you never know. Certain whales can certainly be capable of doing random shit. We saw the pocket 9s earlier. That was a real hand that I played. We should be bluff catching is what I'm getting at. And we have an amazing catcher, clearly calling. However, the point I'm bringing forward is this is a pretty interesting spot. If I had the ace jack of hearts here, I'd be tempted to flick this one in. It does suck that we could lose to some mergers like we just said. What the hell is he doing here? If he had a hand that wanted to put this much money in, he's almost certainly going to raise on an earlier street, given all of those draws and second best hands that we're representing. King, queen, pocket 7s, pocket 6s, almost always going to raise the turn. This leaves his range littered in missed draws like 5-4, 8-9, 10-9 of spades, ace-8 of spades, hands that were good on turn, and now he's so disappointed that they didn't get there, he just shits himself and goes all in. Value into potential bluffs. That passivity on earlier streets just leaves him so void of strong hands. I want to look this one up. These weaker players are really going to split their ranges into certain types of hands when they take certain lines. Fiercely watch them. There is information that wouldn't be available versus better players. Understand how they play, how they think, what their ranges are when they take certain lines, and you'll be able to bluff catch very efficiently. We flick this one in and the whale mucks. Okay, this last point before we wrap up. Incentive can create transparency. As we've touched on throughout this video, isolating the whale is worth something. Most regs understand this and will be trying to achieve it themselves. This shifts theirs and our ranges. Let's look at a couple of hands. Another hand from that Santa session, a little wacky off the bat. We're opening up the queen jack offsuit under the gun, which is questionable. The whale in this very moment was agitated, ready to give away money. Everyone understood that, meaning that they're going to be playing a heavy call strat themselves. We're going to get to realize with queen jack, sometimes get to go heads up in position versus center, pushing the boundaries a little bit. This would start to lose if people were onto that and started to up their aggressive frequencies, which I don't think everyone in this game would have been doing. That good reg with the pocket kings earlier comes in for the call, middle position. Another reg on the button calls. We go 4 ways to jack 5-5 with Mr. Claus. Interesting spot here. Now, with the big fella out of the pot, I'm checking range here for sure. We're an equity dog, we're out of position. Let's let them open the action. No reason to build any bets. But I think it makes sense to take a loss leader trader of sorts, play a transparent range by putting in a c-bet, allowing both of these players to fold pocket tens to manifest a situation where we often get to go heads up in position versus the big dog who's going to call with king 10 offsuit, pocket twos, you name it. I'm giving a little bit up versus these players, not much, to manifest a very good situation. Interesting thought. I'm not absolutely sold on it, but I think it makes sense. Any opportunity I get to isolate myself versus a play like this in position, I'm reluctant to not go for it. This creates transparency. These players know that my range is too equity dense, too many decent hands in range, and they get to overfold. So when they continue, we need to be pretty careful. This lad should be folding pocket nines, pocket tens, understanding that my range is rich in a jack plus. This simply means the equity of a hand like queen jack plummets in this scenario. Middle of range, clear check. After they check back, the situation improves. If they had a 5, pocket 6s, etc., they're very likely going to bet. Maybe he does have pocket 10s and didn't realize that my range was as strong as it was betting in this situation. Can have some worse jacks. I go for a bet for a small size, respecting the fact that that range is what it is on flop. He should have king jack, ace jack, shouldn't have pocket 10s as much as he probably does. Maybe this is slightly underplayed, but the point of the hand that he should be onto the fact that I'm c-betting a transparently strong range, and that is okay, because the scenario where we go heads up with the whale is worth that small loss. He goes for the 10 call and we're good with the queen jack. This next one is a hypothetical hand. Whale opens EP, we get a flat from a reg in the cutoff. This is the first point of transparency. In a situation like this, if you ever see a reg flat in such a good situation to 3-bet and isolate the whale, transparency is there. Very unlikely, unless you're a very tricky player and expecting us to play aggressive behind, you'd ever throw in a smooth call with a hand that's good enough to 3-bet. If he has 10-9 suited plus, he's going to 3-bet this situation. This is drowning in a speculative hand that's just trying to play in position versus the whale. Pocket 2s through pocket 5s, 5-7 suited, king 5 suited, etc. This means that both of these ranges are out of whack. I'm pumping this one up, squeezing very aggressively with a linear range. Queen jack of spades in there all day long. We go 15 blinds. Probably could go a little bigger to ensure we isolate. Whale comes along and we go 3 ways. Interesting c-bet spot, not absolutely in love with it. Let's just say that we do. Go for a small bet and the reg continues to call. That transparency pre just makes me think this range is a little vulnerable. Lots of pocket pairs, 6-5 suited, etc., that we're going to be able to efficiently pressurize with a double barrel. Point is that that incentive to play with the whale moves hands in certain directions, and if you're onto that, you can get a very clear idea of where regs ranges are at. All right, let's wrap this up. The main takeaways: widen and open your mind. You want to play pots, you want to be fluid to the situation and the range that's in front of you. Don't use these general heuristics. General heuristics are horrible. They put you in this mindset that this is how I need to play every hand. Poker is so nuanced and you can be incredibly creative with it, much more than the bloody chat pros make out to be. Put yourself in spots where you're playing random and creative strategies to play pots versus these guys. Polar 3-betting strats, play many calls in position. Hands that you may previously have thought were snap 3-bets can actually become calls to open up that situation to play versus these whales that could give their stack away at any minute, especially if you're deep. And finally, isolate if likely. If you think you can get heads up reasonably often, especially if you're in position, go for it. Take lost leader plays to manifest a very good situation that will make up for that small loss on that early decision. Hope you enjoyed this video, guys. There's a few mini courses that tap into this kind of stuff on my site, completely free. Check it out. If not, I'll see you here in the next one.